The avoidant betrayed you. They snaked you in ways that felt calculated, even if they'll claim it wasn't intentional. They led you on, made you believe the relationship was going somewhere, let you invest emotionally while they remained detached, and then they pulled the rug out from under you. Maybe they ghosted after months of consistent contact. Maybe they suddenly ended things when you thought you were building toward commitment. Maybe they started seeing someone else while stringing you along. Maybe they deactivated so completely that the person you thought you knew disappeared and was replaced by a cold stranger who claimed they never felt what you know they felt. However they did it, the result is the same. You feel betrayed, used, discarded. You gave them your time, your energy, your vulnerability, your hope, and they took all of it without reciprocating, then disappeared or destroyed the relationship, leaving you to deal with the aftermath alone while they seemingly move on unbothered. But here's what the avoidant didn't expect. You're not staying broken, you're not staying stuck in the pain they created, you're not spending years pining for them or trying to get them back, or accepting breadcrumbs if they deign to offer them. The avoidant snaked you, but their snake move is backfiring in ways they never anticipated, because you're using the betrayal as catalyst for transformation rather than as confirmation of your inadequacy. You're healing, growing, becoming stronger and more discerning because of what they did to you. You're learning lessons that will prevent you from ever accepting this treatment again. You're developing standards that will filter out every future avoidant before they can get close enough to hurt you. The avoidant thought they were just doing what they always do, getting what they want from someone and then leaving when intimacy gets uncomfortable. But what they didn't expect is that snaking you was the thing that finally woke you up, that pushed you into the growth you'd been avoiding, that turned you into someone who will never be vulnerable to their patterns again. What they also didn't expect is that their snake move would cost them more than it cost you in the long run. Right now, in the immediate aftermath, you're the one hurting. You're grieving, processing betrayal, working through the pain of being discarded by someone you cared about. But the avoidance pain is coming. It's delayed, but it's inevitable. They'll realize what they lost when they see you thriving without them. They'll feel the regret when they recognize that you were rare, someone patient enough to work with their limitations, understanding enough to see past their defenses, secure enough to offer real love. They'll experience the consequences when they try to find someone else who accepts them the way you did, and discover that most people won't tolerate what you tolerated. The snake move that seems like it benefited them in the short term, by allowing them to avoid vulnerability and escape intimacy that scared them, is going to devastate them in the long term when they're alone, full of regrets, recognizing too late that they destroyed something precious because they were too defended to receive what you were offering. The specific ways the avoidant snaked you, and why each one was betrayal. The avoidant snaked you by performing interest they didn't actually have or couldn't sustain. In the beginning, they were present, engaged, consistent. They texted regularly, made plans, showed up, seemed genuinely interested in building something with you. This performance created attachment in you. You bonded to the person they were presenting themselves as. But that person was temporary performance. The real avoidant is the one who emerged later, distant, inconsistent, emotionally unavailable. The snake was making you attached to a version of them that wasn't sustainable, that was always going to disappear once their attachment system got triggered by the deepening connection. They knew, at least unconsciously, that they couldn't maintain the level of presence they were showing initially. But they showed it anyway, got you invested, and then withdrew. That's betrayal. The avoidant also snaked you by accepting your vulnerability while refusing to be vulnerable in return. You opened up to them. You shared your feelings, your fears, your past, your hopes for the future. You made yourself known to them. And they received all of this. They listened, they seemed to understand. They maybe even encouraged your vulnerability by asking questions or by seeming interested. But they never reciprocated. They remained closed, defended, unwilling to share themselves with you in equivalent ways. The imbalance in vulnerability is snake move, because accepting someone's emotional exposure while refusing to expose yourself equivalently is taking without giving. It's creating connection that's one-directional, where you're known but they remain unknown, where you're vulnerable but they stay protected. The avoidant snaked you by letting you believe you had a future together when they knew, or should have known, they weren't capable of that future. They didn't correct you when you talked about plans months out. They didn't stop you when you integrated them into your life in ways that assumed ongoing relationship. They let you hope, let you invest in future with them, let you make decisions based on assumption that the relationship was progressing. But all along, they were either knowing they couldn't give you that future, or they were avoiding thinking about future enough to recognize their incapacity. Either way, allowing you to build hope and investment in future they weren't committed to or capable of is snake move. They should have been honest. I can't give you what you're hoping for. I'm not capable of the commitment you want. I don't see this going where you see it going. But honesty would have required vulnerability and would have risked you leaving. So they stayed silent, let you hope, and snaked you by allowing false expectations to build. The avoidant snaked you by using your patience and understanding as license to treat you poorly. You were patient with their need for space. You were understanding about their difficulty with vulnerability. You accepted their limitations and tried to work with them. And they took your patience and understanding and used it to justify continued poor treatment. They needed more space. You gave it. They couldn't be vulnerable yet. You waited. They weren't ready for commitment. You stayed. Your acceptance of their limitations became permission for them to never push past those limitations, never grow, never give you more. They were comfortable because you were doing all the accommodating. And comfort is enemy of growth. By using your patience as reason to stay exactly as they were, they snaked you into being accomplice in your own deprivation. The avoidant snaked you most profoundly by discarding you when you needed them to step up. At some point you needed more. You needed progression. You needed commitment or clarity or increased emotional presence. And instead of meeting you, instead of attempting to grow into what you needed, they left. They ended it. Or they deactivated so completely that you had to end it. The timing of their departure, right when the relationship was requiring more from them, is ultimate snake move. They took everything you offered when it was easy and convenient for them. Then they abandoned you when continuing would have required them to be uncomfortable, vulnerable, present in ways that scared them. They snaked you by treating you as disposable the moment you required them to show up as real partner, rather than as passive recipient of your care. What the avoidant expected your response to be. The avoidant expected you to fall apart. They expected you to chase them, beg them to stay, accept whatever crumbs they might offer to keep you around as option. They expected that snaking you would result in you being so hurt, so desperate, so attached, that you'd lower your standards even further, that you'd accept even less from them if they decided to come back. The avoidant has experience with this pattern. They've snaked people before, and those people usually responded by pursuing harder, by making themselves smaller, by accepting worse treatment in hopes of maintaining some connection. The avoidant expected you to do the same. They expected that betraying you would make you more desperate for them, not less. The avoidant also expected you to accept their narrative about what happened. They expected you to believe them when they said they never felt what you felt, when they claimed the relationship wasn't that serious, when they framed the ending as mutual or inevitable rather than as their choice, driven by their fear. They expected that you'd internalize their rewriting of history, that you'd doubt your own perceptions of the connection, that you'd question whether you imagined the depth you experienced. The avoidant is practiced at gaslighting, making others doubt their reality by confidently asserting alternative reality. They expected this would work on you, that you'd accept their version where they were never that invested and you were reading too much into everything. The avoidant expected you to stay available. Even if they left, even if they snaked you, they expected that you'd be there if they changed their mind, if they got lonely, if they decided they wanted to try again. They expected that the door would remain open, that you'd be waiting, that you'd take them back if they reached out with minimum effort and minimum accountability. This expectation is based on the avoidance experience that people they discard usually stay emotionally tethered, usually hope for reconciliation, usually give second and third and 10th chances. They didn't expect that you might actually close the door, actually move on, actually refuse access to you that they'd been taking for granted. The avoidant also expected to move on quickly and easily themselves. They expected that leaving you would provide relief from the discomfort of intimacy you were requiring. They expected to feel unburdened, free, validated in their choice to prioritize their defended state over relationship. They expected that whatever minimal guilt or regret they might feel would fade quickly as they returned to their comfortable pattern of superficial connections that don't trigger their attachment wounds. They didn't expect that leaving you would haunt them, that regret would compound over time, that they'd discover you were harder to replace than they assumed. What you did instead, that shocked the avoidance system, instead of falling apart, you got to work. You started therapy to understand why you were attracted to someone avoidant in the first place. You examined your own patterns, your tendency to be attracted to emotionally unavailable people, your habit of accepting less than you deserve, your inclination to make excuses for poor treatment, You recognized that the avoidant snaking you wasn't just about them being dysfunctional. It was also about you accepting dysfunction for far longer than you should have. And you committed to changing that. The work you're doing on yourself is the opposite of what the avoidant expected. They expected you'd be focused on them, on getting them back, on understanding them, on fixing what they broke. But you focused on yourself instead. You recognized that they're not your project, and their healing isn't your responsibility. Your healing is your responsibility, and you took that responsibility seriously. You also refused to accept their narrative. You trusted your own experience of the relationship. You know what you felt. You know what they showed you in the beginning. You know the connection was real even if they're now claiming it wasn't. You refused to let them gaslight you into doubting your perceptions. When they tried to rewrite history, you held on to your truth. You recognized their narrative building as defense mechanism, as their way of managing guilt about how they treated you. But their need to minimize what you had doesn't change what you experienced. You kept your reality intact, even as they tried to undermine it. And maintaining your reality protected you from the additional mindfuck of believing their lies about what happened. Instead of staying available, you closed the door. You blocked them. You deleted their number. You removed them from social media. You told mutual friends you don't want to hear about them. You created boundaries that make reconciliation impossible without significant effort on their part. Effort you're confident they're not capable of making. The door closing shocked the avoidant because it removed their power. They expected to maintain the option of you even after snaking you, but you removed yourself as option. You made yourself completely unavailable in ways that communicate finality they've never experienced before. And the finality is forcing them to face that some losses are permanent, that some betrayals can't be undone, that some people won't give infinite chances. You moved forward with your life in visible ways. You didn't hide in your grief. You didn't stop living because they left. You kept posting on social media, kept spending time with friends, kept pursuing your interests and goals. And if the avoidant is watching, and they probably are watching, at least occasionally, they're seeing that you're not destroyed by their absence. They're seeing that you're functioning, maybe even thriving. They're seeing that their snake move didn't devastate you the way they might have expected it would. And your continued functioning is evidence that challenges their narrative about how important they are, about how much damage they caused, about whether they made the right choice leaving you. The regret that's building in them that they didn't anticipate. The avoidant is beginning to feel regret they didn't expect to feel. Initially, when they first snaked you, there was relief. Relief from the pressure of your expectations, relief from the discomfort of increasing intimacy, relief from having to face their own limitations. But relief is temporary. As time passes, as the acute discomfort of intimacy fades, what remains is growing awareness of what they lost. The regret is starting small, occasional thoughts about you, memories of good moments, recognition that you are patient with them in ways most people aren't. But the regret is growing as the avoidant tries to move forward and discovers that finding someone else who accepts them the way you did is nearly impossible. The regret includes the avoidant recognizing that you were offering them exactly what they needed for healing, and they rejected it. You were offering patience while they worked through their stuff. You were offering understanding of their patterns. You were offering love that was secure enough to handle their insecurity. These are the conditions avoidants need to feel safe enough to start dismantling their defenses. But the avoidant was too defended to recognize what you were offering while you were offering it. Now that you're gone, now that they're dealing with people who are less patient, less understanding, less willing to accept their limitations, they're recognizing what you provided. And the recognition is creating regret that's deeper than the avoidant has capacity to process. Without therapeutic help, they're probably not getting. The regret is also about the avoidant understanding they destroyed the relationship through their own fear. They can't blame you. You didn't leave because you were too demanding or too needy or too anything. You left because they treated you poorly and you finally chose yourself. The avoidant has to sit with the reality that they're the villain in this story. They're the one who snaked someone who didn't deserve it. They're the one who betrayed trust. They're the one who chose fear over love. And this level of responsibility is creating shame that the avoidant doesn't know how to manage. The shame is intensifying the regret, creating feedback loop where they feel bad about what they did, feel worse about feeling bad because it confirms their core belief that they're fundamentally flawed. And cycle continues without resolution. The avoidance regret is compounded by the permanence of your absence. If you were still available, if they knew they could reach out and you'd respond, the regret would be manageable because it wouldn't represent real loss. But your complete unavailability means the regret is about something they can't fix, can't undo, can't resolve through just reaching out with half-assed apology. The permanence makes the regret unbearable because it forces the avoidant to live with the consequences of their choices without ability to escape those consequences through re-engaging with you. They snaked you expecting they could unsnake you if they decided they wanted to. But you've made unsnaking impossible. And the impossibility is teaching them lessons about consequences they've avoided learning their entire life. The comparison trap they're stuck in now, the avoidant is comparing everyone they meet to you, and everyone is coming up short. The new people aren't as patient as you were. They don't understand the avoidance patterns the way you did. They're not willing to work with the avoidance limitations. They have their own standards and boundaries that they enforce. The avoidant thought they could easily find someone else, thought that what you offered was common, thought they could get the same acceptance and patience from anyone. But they're discovering that you were rare. Most secure people aren't interested in dating someone as avoidant as they are. Most people with healthy boundaries don't tolerate emotional unavailability. The avoidant is learning that you were special through the painful process of trying to replace you and failing repeatedly. The comparison also includes the avoidant recognizing that you were the best partner they've had or likely will have. You offered more understanding, more patience, more genuine care than anyone else has offered them. You were willing to work with their limitations in ways that created conditions where they could have healed if they'd been willing to do the work. But they weren't willing. And now they're with people who don't offer those conditions, who require more than the avoidant can give, who leave when the avoidant does their typical distancing moves. The avoidant is experiencing the natural consequences of their patterns with people who won't tolerate those patterns, and the experiencing is making them realize that you are exceptional in your tolerance. But exceptional tolerance that they exploited rather than appreciated. The comparison trap means the avoidant can't move on cleanly. Every new date is measured against you. Every new connection is found wanting because it's not the connection they had with you. The avoidant is stuck with you as reference point, even though they destroyed the relationship. They're haunted by you, by what they had with you, by what they could have had if they'd been different. And being haunted is preventing them from fully engaging with new people, because part of them is always comparing, always finding the new person insufficient, always wishing they could have you back while knowing they can't because of what they did. The comparison trap is also forcing the avoidant to recognize that the problems they convinced themselves were about incompatibility with you are actually problems with them. With you, they told themselves the relationship couldn't work because of X, Y, or Z incompatibilities. But now they're finding similar issues with new people, or they're finding that new people won't accept their limitations at all. The pattern is revealing itself as the pattern, and the avoidant is having to face that they're the common denominator. The problems weren't about you not being right for them. The problems are about them being unable to show up for anyone, being too defended for healthy relationship with any partner. This realization is devastating, because it means all the reasons they gave themselves for leaving you were lies they told themselves to avoid facing their own dysfunction. How your transformation is the ultimate revenge, without being revenge. Your healing and growth are the best possible outcome for you, and they happen to be the thing that impacts the avoidant most deeply, even though that's not why you're doing it. You're healing because you deserve to heal, because you need to break patterns that made you vulnerable to avoidance, because you're committed to becoming someone who requires and receives healthy love. But as side effect of your transformation, the avoidant is watching you become everything they needed you to be, while simultaneously becoming completely unavailable to them. You're developing secure attachment. You're establishing boundaries. You're radiating the kind of health and wholeness that comes from doing deep personal work. And the avoidant is seeing all of this through social media, through mutual friends, through whatever information reaches them, and recognizing that they lost you just as you were becoming your best self. The transformation is impactful to the avoidant because it proves their narrative wrong. They told themselves you were too needy, too dependent on the relationship, too unable to handle their independence. But you're demonstrating complete independence. You're thriving without them. You're not waiting for them. You're not diminished by their absence. You're enhanced by the freedom to grow without their dysfunction constraining you. Every sign of your wellness is evidence that their narrative about you was defensive lie rather than truth. And having their narrative proven wrong is forcing the avoidant to face that they were wrong about you, wrong about what you needed, wrong about why the relationship ended. Your transformation is also creating the exact person the avoidant wishes they could be with. The secure, boundaried, healed version of you that's emerging through your work is the ideal partner for anyone, including for avoidants who are willing to do their work. But you're only available to people who've done their work, and the avoidant hasn't done their work. So they're seeing you become exactly what they needed while recognizing they can't have access to this version of you because they destroyed the relationship before you became this person, and now you're unavailable to them. The timing is tragic for the avoidant. You're finally the person they could build with, but they lost you before you became that person, and they lost you through their own betrayal. The ultimate aspect of your transformation is that you're not doing it for them, not doing it to make them regret losing you. You're doing it for yourself. And this purity of motive makes the impact on them even stronger, because it proves you've genuinely moved on. If you are transforming to get their attention, they could dismiss it as performance. But you're transforming because you're committed to your own growth, regardless of whether they ever know about it. The genuine nature of your transformation is what makes it undeniable to them. You're not playing games, you're actually healing. And your actual healing is showing them what they lost, what they could have had if they'd been brave enough to stay and grow alongside you. What you should do with this knowledge, understanding that your transformation is impacting the avoidant, shouldn't change anything about what you're doing. Don't slow your growth because you're worried about them seeing it. Don't hide your healing because you don't want to seem like you're trying to make them jealous. Your growth is yours, and it should be visible because you're not hiding anymore, you're not making yourself small anymore, you're not dimming your light for anyone. If the avoidant sees your transformation and feels regret, that's appropriate consequence for their behavior. But their regret is not your concern and shouldn't influence your path. You should also resist any temptation to let them back in if they reach out expressing regret about losing you. Regret doesn't equal changed capacity. The avoidant can fully recognize what they lost and still be completely incapable of doing what relationship requires. Unless they've been in intensive therapy for substantial time, a year minimum, their regret is just feeling without capacity to act differently. Don't let emotional appeals about missing you or recognizing your value convince you to give them another chance they haven't earned. Changed behavior over sustained time is only evidence worth considering. Everything else is words designed to get access to you that they don't deserve. Use the knowledge that you're impacting them to reinforce your commitment to your boundaries. You're impacting them precisely because you're unavailable, because you're focused on yourself, because you've moved on completely. The impact exists because of your boundaries, not despite them. This should motivate you to maintain those boundaries even if they reach out, even if they seem different, even if part of you wants to believe they've changed. The boundaries are what's protecting you and paradoxically what's creating the impact on them. Maintain them strictly. You should also use this knowledge to complete your healing around the relationship. Understanding that they're regretting losing you, that they're stuck in comparison trap, that they're experiencing consequences for snaking you, can provide closure that their actual behavior never provided. They never apologized adequately. They never took full responsibility. They never gave you the acknowledgement you deserved. But knowing that they're suffering the natural consequences of their choices can be its own form of closure. Not because their suffering makes you happy. You're healed enough that you don't need them to suffer. But because their consequences confirm that what happened was real, was wrong, was their responsibility. And justice exists even if it's just natural consequences rather than direct accountability. The lesson about never accepting snake behavior again. The avoidant snaking you taught you what to never accept again. You've learned to recognize the signs of performative interest that won't be sustained. You've learned that accepting someone's vulnerability while they refuse to be vulnerable with you is red flag, not relationship building. You've learned that patience and understanding are virtues only when offered to people who are actively working on themselves, not when offered to people who are using your patience as excuse to stay stuck. You've learned that anyone who lets you build hope in a future they're not committed to is betraying you, and you should leave at first sign of that dynamic rather than staying to see if they'll eventually commit. You've also learned about your own patterns that made you vulnerable to being snaked. Maybe you're attracted to emotionally unavailable people because availability feels boring or smothering based on your own attachment wounds. Maybe you stay too long in relationships that aren't working because leaving feels like failure or abandonment. Maybe you make excuses for poor treatment because deep down you don't believe you deserve better. Whatever your patterns, the avoidance snaking you has illuminated them, and illumination is first step toward change. You're in therapy addressing these patterns now. You're developing awareness that will protect you from repeating them. The lesson also includes knowing that when someone shows you who they are through their actions, you should believe them immediately, rather than believing their words or believing in their potential. The avoidant showed you through their consistent emotional unavailability that they couldn't meet your needs, But you believed their words about wanting to try, believed that your patience would inspire their growth. You've learned that actions are truth and everything else is distraction. When someone's actions show you they're incapable, believe the actions and leave. Don't wait for the words to match the actions, because with avoidance, that matching never comes. The most important lesson is that being snaked doesn't define you, but how you respond to being snaked does. You could have stayed stuck in victimhood, stayed focused on what they did to you, stayed angry and bitter and unable to move forward. But you chose differently. You chose to use the betrayal as catalyst. You chose to grow from the pain instead of being destroyed by it. You chose to become someone who won't accept snake behavior again, instead of becoming someone who expects to be snaked and accepts it as inevitable. This choice, the choice to transform rather than to stay broken, is what defines you, not what the avoidant did to you. The avoidant snaked you, but the snake move backfired. They expected you to stay broken, stay available, stay stuck. But you healed, closed the door, moved forward. They expected to escape consequence, to move on easily, to find someone else who would accept them as readily as you did. But they're drowning in regret, trapped in comparison, unable to find anyone who offers what you offered. They expected that snaking you would benefit them by allowing them to avoid the discomfort of intimacy you were requiring. But snaking you cost them the best relationship they'll probably ever have. Cost them person who could have helped them heal if they'd been willing to receive help. Cost them their chance at the kind of partnership that could have made their life meaningful instead of just defended. What they didn't expect is that you're the one who won. Not because their life is falling apart, though it probably is, but because your life is coming together. You're healing, you're growing. You're becoming secure where you were anxious, boundaried where you were accommodating, discerning where you were accepting. You're building life that doesn't include them, life that's better than anything you had with them, life that's organized around your growth, rather than around managing someone else's dysfunction. The avoidant snaked you, but you shed the snake skin they left you in, and emerged as someone they can't hurt anymore, someone who won't accept treatment they gave you, someone whose proof that being snaked doesn't determine your future, how you respond to being snaked does. And you responded by becoming everything they lost and everything they needed but were too defended to appreciate. That's what they didn't expect. That's what they'll regret forever. And that's why you've already won. The specific moments when the avoidant realizes what they lost, the avoidant's realization of what they lost, doesn't come all at once. It comes in waves, in specific moments that hit them unexpectedly and leave them sitting with regret they can't escape. The first moment is when they're with someone new, and that person does something, says something, reacts to something, handles a situation, in a way that makes the avoidant viscerally aware that this person is not you. Maybe the new person gets upset about the avoidant needing space and makes it into a dramatic conflict, whereas you used to give space gracefully even when it hurt you. Maybe the new person doesn't understand a reference the avoidant makes, doesn't laugh at the kind of humor you both shared, doesn't get the avoidant in ways you effortlessly got them. These small moments accumulate into devastating recognition. You understood them in ways that are rare, maybe irreplaceable, and they threw that understanding away. Another moment of realization comes when the avoidant is going through something difficult, and they instinctively want to reach out to you. Maybe they're stressed about work, or they received bad news, or they're just having a hard day and they want to talk to the person who used to make them feel better. Their fingers hover over their phone before they remember you're not available anymore. They burned that bridge. They can't call you when they need support because they didn't show up when you needed support. The blocked number, the severed connection, the permanent unavailability of you hits them in these moments of need. And they're forced to sit with the isolation they created through pushing away the one person who consistently showed up for them. The avoidant also has moments of realization when they see you from a distance, physically running into you, or seeing you in photos on mutual friends' social media, or hearing about you through people you both know. In these moments, they're confronted with visual evidence of your continued existence and your apparent wellness. Without them, you look good. You look happy. You look like someone who's moved on completely. And the avoidant has a moment of cognitive dissonance, where they have to reconcile the person they're seeing, thriving, glowing, clearly fine, with the narrative they told themselves about you being too dependent on the relationship, too unable to handle their independence, too fragile to handle the ending. The visual evidence destroys their narrative, and with the narrative destroyed, they're left with just the truth. You were stronger than they gave you credit for, and you're proving that strength by building a life that clearly doesn't need them in it. There are also moments when the avoidant is alone, late at night usually, when defenses are lower and truth is harder to avoid. And they think about the relationship with clarity they didn't have while you were together. They remember specific moments, the way you looked at them with such genuine care, the patience you showed when they were being difficult, the vulnerability you offered that they couldn't reciprocate, the future you wanted to build that they were too scared to commit to. In these late-night moments of clarity, the avoidant sees the relationship for what it actually was, you offering real love and them being too defended to receive it. And they see themselves for what they actually are, not independent and strong as they've been telling themselves, but scared and limited and incapable of accepting the very thing they most want. These moments of clarity are brutal because they're moments of seeing truth without the protective filter of defensiveness. And the truth is that they destroyed something precious because they were too damaged to recognize its value while they had it. Why the avoidant can't undo what they did, no matter how much they regret it. The avoidant might reach out. They might send the apology they should have sent months ago. They might express the regret they're feeling, might acknowledge what they lost, might even beg for another chance. But here's what you need to understand. Even if they reach out with perfect words, even if their regret is genuine, even if they'd had all the realizations described above, they still can't undo what they did. The betrayal happened, the trust was broken, the relationship was destroyed through their choices. And no amount of apologizing or regretting can rebuild what they tore down, unless they've done the deep therapeutic work that would actually change their capacity. And most avoidants never do that work, even when they're drowning in regret. The avoidant also can't undo what they did because you're different now. Even if you were inclined to give them another chance, you're not the same person they snaked. You've grown. You've healed. You've developed boundaries and standards that you didn't have before. The version of you that would have accepted their treatment, that would have made excuses for their limitations, that would have stayed hoping they'd change, that version of you is gone. The current version of you requires things the avoidant still isn't capable of providing: consistent emotional availability, sustained vulnerability, follow-through on commitments, therapy-backed behavioral change demonstrated over months. And requiring these things means that even if they come back, even if you are open to reconciliation, the bar for re-entry is so high that they can't clear it without fundamental transformation they probably haven't undergone. The permanence of what they did is also about the lost time that can't be recovered. They wasted months or years of your life. They took your time, energy, and emotional investment during a period when you could have been finding someone capable of actually building with you. That time is gone. You can't get back the months you spent hoping they'd change. You can't recover the opportunities you missed while you were focused on them. Even if they're sorry, even if they wish they could undo it, the time is permanently lost. And time is the one resource that's truly non-renewable. The avoidance regret can't restore what their behavior cost you in terms of time you'll never get back. What your complete indifference would do to them if you achieve it. The avoidant's greatest fear, greater than your anger or your hurt, is your complete indifference. Anger means you still care enough to be affected by them. Hurt means they still matter to you. But indifference means they've become irrelevant, that they no longer occupy any significant space in your emotional world, that they're just a person you used to know who you've released completely. If you reach the point of genuine indifference, not performed indifference but real internal state where you truly don't care what they're doing, or whether they regret losing you, or whether they ever reach out, that indifference would devastate the avoidance ego in ways that nothing else could. Complete indifference means that when the avoidant reaches out, if they reach out, you're not excited or upset or conflicted. You're just unbothered. You might respond politely and briefly, the way you'd respond to an acquaintance, and then you'd go back to your life without thinking about the interaction again. Or you might not respond at all, not because you're trying to punish them through silence, but because responding would require energy you're not interested in expending on someone who's no longer relevant to you. This level of indifference communicates to the avoidant that they've lost all power, all importance, all significance in your life. And for someone whose ego requires believing they have lasting impact on people they've been intimate with, your indifference is ego death. Your indifference would also rob the avoidant of the narrative they need to manage their guilt. If you're angry, they can tell themselves you're too sensitive or you're not over them. If you're hurt, they can feel guilty but also somewhat powerful. They affected you deeply enough that you're still hurt. But if you're indifferent, they can't create any narrative that protects their ego or manages their guilt. Your indifference is just acceptance that they're not important enough to have strong feelings about anymore, positive or negative. And being unimportant to someone who used to care about them deeply is the outcome the avoidant psychology is least equipped to handle. The ultimate truth about being snaked by an avoidant is that it happened to you, but it doesn't define you. And more importantly, it happened because of them, not because of you. You didn't cause them to snake you by being too much, or too needy, or too anything. You didn't fail to be enough to make them stay. The snaking was about their limitations, their fears, their inability to receive love, their choice to protect their defended state rather than risk the vulnerability that real relationship requires. Understanding this truth completely is what allows you to release any remaining shame or self-blame you might be carrying about the relationship ending. The truth is also that being snaked by an avoidant is a painful teacher, but the lessons are valuable if you're willing to learn them. You've learned about your own patterns, about red flags you'll never ignore again, about the difference between someone's potential and their actual capacity. You've learned that you can survive betrayal and come out stronger. You've learned that your worth isn't determined by whether someone damaged, chose you, or appreciated you. You've learned that the only person whose behavior you can control is yourself. And you've learned to control your behavior in ways that protect you rather than in ways that accommodate others' dysfunction. The ultimate truth is that the avoidant snaking you was the beginning of your transformation, not the end of your story. They thought they were just doing what they always do, getting what they want and leaving when things get uncomfortable. But what they actually did was free you from a relationship that would have limited you indefinitely, push you into growth you'd been avoiding, and prove to you that you're strong enough to walk away from love that doesn't serve you. The avoidant snaked you, but the snake move was the catalyst that turned you into someone they can never hurt again. Someone who will never accept what you accepted from them. Someone who knows your worth in ways you didn't know it before they showed you through their betrayal that you deserve better than what they offered. And that knowledge, that transformation, that growth, that's what they didn't expect. They expected you to stay broken, but you became whole. They expected you to stay stuck, but you evolved. They expected to move on easily while you suffered. But you're thriving while they're drowning in regret about losing someone they'll never find again, because you were one of a kind. And they destroyed that through their fear. That's what they didn't expect. That betraying you would cost them everything while costing you nothing in the long run except the lesson you needed to learn about what you'll never accept again. You won. They lost. And your winning has nothing to do with their losing, and everything to do with you choosing yourself, healing yourself, and building a life where someone snaking you becomes just a chapter in your story rather than the story itself. A chapter that taught you exactly what you needed to learn to never let it happen again.